Hello, good morning. Um, our webinar will start at 10:05 a.m. Please stand by. Thank you.
Good morning to each and every one of you. Welcome to the second and last installment of the Applied Ethics Lecture Series brought to you by the Kasarian Gender Studies Program and the Philosophy discipline of UP Baguio. While the previous lecture dealt with the ethics of recognition, today's lecture will focus on feminist ethics. From a certain perspective, feminist ethics is really a fitting complement to the ethics of recognition. For one, being a woman is one axis of difference that philosophers and thinkers throughout history are continually fighting for to be recognized, owing to their collective experience of subordination, discrimination, and the utter disregard of their freedom and dignity. For another, ethical issues and questions brought to the fore by how our society have treated and continually treat women in our homes, in the school, and in the workplace concretize and put urgency to the necessity of an ethics of recognition. Of course, there are many things to be said other than this. So, without much further ado, let me begin this philosophical conversation by introducing to you our guest lecturer for today. Our guest lecturer teaches philosophy at the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. She earned her Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy in the same university. She recently finished her Master of Arts in Philosophy at UP Diliman. She was also a recipient of the International Honor Society of P Kappa P official membership in recognition of her graduate academic record. Her main area of research is on feminist philosophy and feminist pragmatism, but socio-political philosophy and gender studies are also her areas of interest. Her master's thesis, which focused on feminist pragmatism's emancipatory potential, was presented and very well received at a conference on women philosophers held at Universität Paderborn, Germany last year. She is also part of an existing project on women philosophers organized by the Center for the History of Women Philosophers and Scientists in Germany. She has also been invited to present her research and join the Scholars Circle of Contemporary Feminist Philosophers in New York last year. Her present researches reflect her commitment to make use of philosophy as a tool to contribute to present discourses and to be of service to the people. She has delivered lectures and talks in forums and seminars and also presented papers in various local and international conferences in philosophy. In UP Los Baños, she teaches feminist philosophy, ethics, contemporary philosophy, and socio-political philosophy. I am honored to introduce to you today our guest speaker, a serious philosopher, a tireless advocate, and most of all, a great friend, Professor Krissah Marga Taganas.
Hi everyone. Good morning. I'll be sharing my cartoon.
Yes, we can see your screen na, Ma'am Marga.
Thank you, Sir Vlad. Um, just a note, no, I'm a little bit under the weather, so I really hope that you bear with me at least until the end of the lecture. And you may call my attention, no, just in case magkaroon ng interruption or may hindi maintindihan because of this. So anyway, again, good morning to everyone. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this worthwhile event. I hope you are all safe and well amidst the pandemic. So it has been an honor and privilege to be with you today. And thank you for the invitation to the philosophy discipline and to Kasarian UP. All right. So again, I'm here to discuss with you, no, feminist ethics and violence against women. Okay. So last November 25, we celebrated the National Consciousness Day of ending or the elimination of violence against women. Okay. So My lecture for today will focus on the feminist philosophical perspective on violence against women. All right, so again, I am Marga from UPLB. You can call me Ma'am Marga. Okay. So, all right, before I start, no, siguro some of you, no, are hesitant, no, or maybe some of you are identifying yourself, no, as a feminist, no, or you know a little bit about feminism. But I also take it that some of you are not really that well informed, or maybe some of you are very reluctant or even doubtful to consider yourself as feminist. No, so some of you may be, maybe saying that, oh, hindi naman na kailangan ng feminism, no, during these times. Well, after all, meron naman na yung mga rights, no, na kinaklamor natin before. I mean, we have already achieved, no, this public good before. Or some of you will say that, well, pang babae lang yan, no? I mean, being a feminist, no, dapat babae ka para maging feminist ka. Okay? Or may mga nagsasabi rin, well, feminism para sa mga reklamador lang yan, no? Yung mga nagrereklamo lang sa sistema, etc. Okay, but I take it that this is skeptical views about feminism or about being a feminist. So it's just like this is all just a misunderstanding or a result of not being so much informed about what feminism is truly is. No, but I am here to tell you that so long as you believe that subordination must end, no? All forms of subordination, of discrimination against women, against members of marginalized sectors, okay? So long as you believe that these forms of discrimination must end, then you can call yourself a feminist, okay? So yes, feminism is not only for women, but it is for everyone, all right? Yes, feminism benefits men and other marginalized sectors of the community. All right. So the reason that women can now vote, the reason that we can now enter the workforce, we have equal access to um, public goods, no education, etc. No, the reason we in this generation, we can actually call ourselves women, no, but by just simply being and absolutely women, without belonging to someone else, no, without being wise, without being a mother, no, we already achieve, no, this personal and autonomy, no, itong mga personal and material autonomy and goods, no, that we are now enjoying because of feminism, right? So I'll start my lecture with, a bit of my experience, as a woman and as an academic. All right, we all know that feminism is very, or experience, the experience is very central to feminism. All right, so let me tell you a very, very short story that happened to me, I think 2 years ago. So, or maybe I think last year pala. No? So, there was this conference I attended in UP Diliman, wherein I presented my research about the potential of feminist philosophy and discussing my experiences too in a conference, or a seminar attended by educators, no, yung mga teachers ng ethics, okay, all over the country. All right. So in there, no, I have told the story of how the members of this ethics teaching seminar, no, started joking about moral issues about women, like how women are just wives, no, or and all of the, what you can imagine, degrading ideas, no, that are said, or mentioned as jokes in that academic forum. So there's this in the Q&A portion, there's this person, who basically just countered every argument, in my research. He's basically saying that, feminist philosophy, it doesn't even exist. Hindi naman nag-exist yung feminist philo. Kung babae lang yan. No, hindi yan parte ng philosophy. Okay? And so he just went on and saying that I know that because I am a philo major. I am also a professor. Okay? And he just went on saying that, well, it's just the natural order of things. Hindi naman talaga oppress ang mga babae. Okay? And, it went on for like, 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes of just belittling me, and my skills or my ability while I intelligently answer all his concerns and questions. And I know that at some point in your life, no, you already experienced, or you are already you were caught up in the kind of situation wherein you were or you felt violated in ways that you didn't imagine. And I want you all to take these experiences, to think about these instances in your life, and to take this as we discuss feminist ethics and violence against women. So issues like violence, no, are actually issues that are very sensitive and very difficult. Even if I've already been teaching feminist philosophy for like 4 years already, and it doesn't get easier every time. So I really hope that with the time that I have today, I will be able, to at least briefly but substantially explain the important issues and questions, okay, and examine these perspectives, okay, in the feminism. All right, so I'll pick this research, no, or sorry, this um, discussion will be divided into two. So the first is what is feminist ethics, no? So what are its characterizations? What are its commitments, its goals? Okay, and we have to bear this in mind. How will feminist ethics, address and evaluate women's issues? Okay, so let's approach these issues later on with these methods in mind. Next would be the feminist perspective, on ending violence against women. So, what is the role of feminist philosophy, in the discourse of VAW? All right, what are the concepts, that are paramount in addressing these issues, patriarchy, gender equality, etc. No, so how do we challenge? So basically, how do we challenge and change the conversation? No, what possibilities does feminist ethics offer? All right, in articulating these issues. All right. So for my discussion on feminist ethics, we'll be talking about its tasks and goals, a brief history, and its development. What are the feminist criticisms of traditional ethics? What are the current themes and concerns? And lastly, how do we know that we are doing feminist ethics? Now, what are the basic conditions of doing feminist ethics? All right. So as I have mentioned, the second part will be divided also into three. No? So these concepts, what is the role, and how do we change and challenge the conversation? All right. So for the first part, so let's identify first what's feminist ethics. All right. So distinguished by an explicit commitment to correcting male biases in traditional ethics, okay, it is, or feminist ethics is defined, as a response to the masculinist and androcentric way of thinking in philosophy, not specifically in the mainstream or traditional ethical theories. All right. So feminist ethics, okay, conviction starts with women. Okay, women is morally sorry, women. All right, women. Okay, is more the subordination of women is morally wrong, and the moral experience of women is as worthy of that men. Okay, so basically, um, this specific field in feminist philosophy, which is feminist ethics, no, it's actually a response to the traditional ethical theories. No, because we assert, we articulate women's issues, no, na hindi naman nadi-discuss or previously neglected sa as moral issues, no, in the field of mainstream ethics. Right? So, what are the primary tasks? Okay, so we can identify two tasks or goals of feminist ethics. Okay, in the theoretical level, okay, we aim to develop philosophical accounts, okay, of morality and of the central moral concepts that treat women's moral experience respectfully, okay, but never uncritically. So we aim to articulate the biases. Ano ba yung mga practices? Ano ba yung mga theories in mainstream ethics, in traditional way of doing ethics, no? That devalue no, women's moral experiences. And then, of course, by identifying these streams, no, by identifying these marks, all right, we also commit, no, to the practical level. All right? So, lagi natin tatandaan to, no? When you are a feminist or when you deal with study of feminist philosophy, laging twofold siya. Okay? Laging meron theoretical, titignan natin, ano ba yung mga biases na to? Okay? What are these biases? Let's demonstrate these biases. And we must have a conscious effort, okay, to articulate this and to prescribe, no, morally justifiable ways, no, uh, of actions, of resisting such actions and practices. All right? And lastly, it's nandun yung goal natin. There is a conscious effort, there is a deliberate effort of improving, no, improving the lives and conditions of women. Okay, that will promote women's emancipation. No, hindi po pwedeng, okay, nakita ko na merong mali dito, nakita ko na ito yung mga biases sa ganitong mga theories. But okay lang, no? I mean, hindi natatapos doon when you are engaging in feminist studies. There must always be that commitment, okay, on your part. Okay, so not only change the theories, but to change the society. Okay, but to change women's condition. All right. So very brief lang, no? So ano ba yung history, no, and development ng ethics? All right. So noon pa man, no, even before nagkaroon tayo ng term for feminist philosophy, feminist ethics, meron ng mga isolated instances of moral opposition on the subordination of women. No, and we can see this in the thinkers' work. So from Mary Astell to Mary Wollstonecraft to John Stuart Mill, Harriet Taylor Mill, Simone de Beauvoir, Carol Gilligan, Raynell Nodding, and of course, no, the contemporary feminist philosophers. Okay, so we must also note, no, that it wasn't until 1970s, no, early 1980s, na nagamit yung term na feminist ethics. Okay, why? Kasi they're very recent lang. No, feminist philosophy as a field is very young, very recent compared to other branches of philosophy. So it was very recent na nagkaroon tayo ng term, no, feminist ethics. No, it was raised because nagkaroon ng doubt yung mga feminists or feminist thinkers in the possibility of having a fruitful discussion, having a fruitful deliberation or ethical deliberation on women's issues. Kung ang mga gamit naman nating mga konsepto ay anchored sa traditional ethical theories. Okay, na sinasabi natin are deeply male biased. Alright? So ano ba itong mga criticisms na to? Okay? So nagva-vary sa, no? But in general, meron agreement among feminist philosophers sa mga bagay na kinikritik nila, okay, doon sa mainstream ethics. Alright? So they started with the lack of concern for women's interests. Alright? So nakita naman natin, no, that through our history, through our literature, we can really say, no, it's a clear manifestation that women are disadvantaged. No, women are historically disadvantaged. Okay? That is only very recent na nagkaroon tayo ng same access to the public goods that men, no, were arguably, no, enjoying for a very long time, no, in the society. Okay? So walang masyadong discussion, no, on birth, on pregnancy. Kung meron man, no, it was of course on the male viewpoint, no, sa standpoint ng mga kalalakihan. All right? Next, merong neglect of women's issues because of the public and private split. Okay? Usually, yung mga domestic issues, domestic concerns, ay nakukulong sa doon lang sa realm ng domestic, ng bahay. Okay? So just because home is considered, no, that which women were or had been, no, confined or historically confined, okay, nagkakaroon ng philosophical devaluation of raising more important questions about the domestic issues that women face. Okay? Nangyayari dyan, hindi sa na-open in public at nakikita lang sa well, problema ng mga mag-asawa yan. Problema ng nanay yan. Okay? Hindi yan sakop no, ng public realm. Alright? So merong mga ganito, no? It made it impossible for us to raise difficult questions, okay, concerning the status quo. All right, there was a denial of women's agency. Okay, so as we also know, may mga philosophers na nag-argue that, well, starting from Aristotle, saying that, well, women are just partial men. Women are deformed men. Thereby, we lack moral reasoning. We lack the ability, the faculty to use our reason. Okay? So, merong denial ng agency natin as women. So, hindi natin take seriously yung mga problems natin. There was a devaluation of women's moral experience and the depreciation of feminine values. We all know, no, and feminists argue that traditional ethical theories are actually very or they are more prioritizing on the issues of or on the values that are deeply masculine or the masculine values like dapat aggressive, no, autonomy, justice, all right, will, domination, and when we look at the feminine values, okay, ito yung about emotion, body, trust, embodiment, all right. So makikita natin that nagkakaroon ng depreciation yung mga feminine, okay, na mga associated values. Okay. So yung devaluation of women's moral experience, walang masyadong particular focus on our experience that we are actually discredited. No? Even now, you notice if we come forward and we tell our stories of violence, of abuses, no? Nagkakaroon ng merong prevalence of support, no? Merong support and sympathy towards men. Maybe kasalanan ng babae kasi pinivoke niya yun eh. Maybe kasalanan ng babae kasi dahil sa suot niya, etc. We don't even have the autonomy over our bodies. We don't have autonomy over our sexuality. All right? That gives way, no, into issues of what? Pornography, abortion, rape. We were not even treated as experts of our experiences. No? That's why, no, dito natin makikita yung importance of experiences. How our experiences inform further theories. All right. So, what are now the themes and concerns no, of feminist ethics? Okay. So firstly, and I think no, covered to ng ating module, especially CPLB. No? So merong specific focus on feminist ethics of care. So for a time, the ethics of care was considered the main or the dominant approach in feminist ethics. Okay. So drawing from feminine values, okay, specifically the issue of care, okay, feminists they put forth they are offered a kind or approach of doing ethics or a way of approaching ethics, which is focused on care instead of autonomy, justice, rules. Okay, so the proposals of this were Carol Gilligan and now Nodding, and it's actually based on relational context bounded, okay, na mga situations in ethics. Okay, so ina-argue ng ethics of care that dapat makita natin that humans are interrelated, no? Hindi dapat na-emphasize impartiality, okay? Na hindi tayo na independent tayo, okay? But that we are interconnected. Okay? So, nandoon yung emphasis on connectedness, okay? Interdependence, no? And value of relationships. All right? So, all the more na nagkakaroon ng emphasis on women's values, no? Feminine values, specifically care. All right? So, of course, we will not just really focus on ethics of care, okay, in discussing feminist ethics today. All right, another concern is, although nagtatalo yung ibang feminists dito, meron pa ring agreement na dapat i-push natin no, yung pag-revalue ng feminine values. Okay? So, how do we revalue feminine values? They should recognize the moral emotions, no, the importance of moral emotions, the values that are associated with women. Okay? How do we view bodies? Sexuality. All right. So in tackling women's issues. Okay. So another concern is of course by doing feminist ethics, we also aim to broaden. We expand ethical domains. No, ini-expand natin yung domain ng ethical ethics by asking new questions. We give birth to new questions, to new methods. We give new, fresh perspectives. no, na galing lahat sa mga experiences natin bilang mga kababaihan at bilang miyembro ng marginalized sectors. Alright? At the same time, no, we also include issues, no, that before ay neglected o hindi napapansin yung moral dimension ng mga issues na to. Tulad ng rape, tulad ng abortion, tulad ng sexual harassment, okay, body image, etc. Okay? So, in that sense, no, there was also a global aim, no, global battle cry, no, that women's rights are human rights. Okay? So we need to build on the emphasis. We need to build on women's experiences in order to articulate these issues. All right? So we expand the ways, no, where women on ways women survive, okay, to the system that kills her. Okay? So dito, we are encouraging others to rethink the way we conceptualize human rights. All right? So now, how do we say, that we are having a condition, a minimum condition, no, yung basic condition of doing feminist ethics. Okay? So of course, okay, feminist ethics or doing feminist ethics cannot or can never begin by assuming that genders are similarly situated. All right? So the fact is that genders are not similarly situated, although arguably they are, of course, intertwined. All right? So, but at the same time, it's also seeing that, well, hindi porke, for example, ikaw, ma'am, hindi naman ako, I don't feel oppressed. I can wear what I want. I feel empowered as a woman. But you, being an empowered woman, no, it doesn't mean that all women are also empowered. So long as there is one woman that is not empowered, okay, all women are not yet empowered. Alright? So, hindi porke ikaw feeling mo empowered ka na, empowered na lahat ng mga kababaihan. Alright? And that, we must always be vigilant, no, on determining yung mga subtle manifestations of gender privilege in our lives. Alright? So again, we also must need to understand, no, when doing feminist ethics, we must understand that individual actions, no, are always, no, and foremost, kailangan natin siyang tignan sa context ng broader social practices. Ma'am, yung pagiging sexist niya, pagiging misogynist, halimbawa, ng mga taong to, no, talagang we are really condemning these people for doing so. No, but it doesn't end there. We must know the dynamics. Paano nag-work ito? Ano yung individual na mga effect? No, ano yung effect nito sa individual actions? Doon sa nangyaring conference na yun, the way they devalue, the way they degraded women and other members of the LGBTQ plus community, hindi naman yun parang, naisip ko lang kaya ko sinabi. Years yun, no? Cumulative yun, no? ng tolerance wherein kasi nagkaroon tayo ng spaces, no? to do these things. Okay, so we need to look at this, not just individual problems, not just condemning people, sexist ka, misogynist ka, but we need to look at this as a structural problem, a structural phenomenon. All right? Hindi siya individual problems ng mga tao, but it's a systematic, and structural phenomenon. All right? So women, we must have an emphasis on women's moral experiences by saying that kailangan natin ng ground for analysis. And experience is the best way to inform these theories. Okay, at the same time, kailangan magkaroon din ng focus on moral dimension of the private life. Okay, so yung domestic issues, kailangan mabigyan yon ng pansin, no, in developing conceptual tools, okay, in the way we articulate these issues. All right. So now we proceeded sa philosophical perspective, okay, on violence against women. Ano ba mako-contribute natin, okay, ng feminist ethics, ng feminist philosophy sa usapin na to? So I'll be showing you some screenshots, okay, some news, okay. So it's just some warning right here, no, na some of these are very sensitive in content and in language. All right. So I just want you to look at them, okay. So hindi ko na i-explain isa-isa, no, but I want you to feel, no, kung tignan ninyo, no, nang maramdaman ninyo. Okay? Ano yung mai-elicit ng mga emotions and at the same time ng mga perspectives and insights of this. So Philippine leader defense on stage here. So it happened in North Korea, in South Korea, okay, during an event. All right, this one. If we remember, karon tayo ng karon ng leak. Okay, may leak yung isang famous uh, there's a famous fraternity na nagkaroon ng leak ng conversation no, from UP. Alright, so dapat ang babae sa kwarto o sa kusina lang. Okay? Then, you just have to respect a woman, have sex with her. Real girls, no? They just have to respect themselves and care for their man, etc. Okay, so Robredo tells the that rape exists because of rapists. But apparently, there's this government official who didn't, at some point understood. No, he didn't understand yung ibig sabihin nito. Okay? There was a specific university or college, no? I think they're in Baguio, okay? Na nagkaroon ng mandatory pregnancy test, which is a violation of the Magna Carta, okay, of women. So they started jokes about rape again, and we are not laughing. I mean, we weren't even laughing from the start to begin with. No? So nagkaroon ng ng hashtag men are trash. Okay, nag-trend in Twitter and other SOCMED accounts. All right, Senator Soto, okay, tweets Tagiwalo for having children out of wedlock na ano lang. Okay. So he signed the law against sexual harassment. All right. So there's a waging war on women opposition in the Philippines. Nakikita natin yun na very recently sa mga celebrities, political prisoners. All right. So now, we're here in the midst of the pandemic. There's maternity deaths, there's unplanned pregnancies, okay, and higher numbers of reported and unreported cases of violence against women. All right, trend ang iya ako. Okay, we started coming forward with our stories against rape culture. Just very recent, sexist jokes daw are the best way of coping with disasters, That is according to Roque. All right. So in this sense, makikita natin that 1 in 3 women, okay, worldwide experience physical sexual violence by intimate partners. Okay, so from UN Women. And in the context of the Philippines, from NBS in 2017, 1 in 4 married women aged 15 to 14 experience physical, sexual, and emotional violence by their husbands or partners. Okay, so let's just have a bit of a definition. Ano itong violence against women? So violence against women and girls is a human rights violation and the immediate and long-term, all right, physical, sexual, and mental consequences for women and girls that can be devastating, and they include death. Okay, meron din tayong gender-based violence. So on account of our on account of our gender. So it's rooted in gender inequality. Okay, so there is abuse of power, harmful norms. All right, that underscore the fact that structural gender-based power differentials place women and girls at risk for multiple forms of violence. Right? Okay, so meron tayong sexual violence, meron domestic violence, and ito very recent, so lalo we are in lockdown, since nag-start yung lockdown, merong online and digital violence. All right. So as I have mentioned, we are already celebrating the 18-day campaign to end violence against women. All right. So ito yung ating theme, recurring theme so that VAW-free community starts with me. Okay. So pasada lang, para meron tayong magkaroon tayo ng reviews yung mga gender-related laws. So again, meron tayong National Consciousness Day for the elimination of VAW, Magna Carta of Women, right? And yung definition of violence against women and children. We also have the Bawal Bastos Act or the Safe Spaces Act. And of course, the House Bill on Soul-G Equality Act. All right? So again, we now proceed to the practical. Okay? So paano ba natin how do we respond? How do we make sense of these issues? How do we challenge and change the conversation. All right. So again, what is the role of feminist ethics in this discourse? All right. So okay, I have identified here some of the concepts that are paramount, okay, in identifying, okay, or in discussing and committing to end all forms of subordination and oppression against women and other vulnerable sectors. Okay? So, importante that we recognize that the root of violence against women is patriarchy. All right? VAW is the most egregious, okay, is a blatant, explicit manifestation of subordination in a patriarchal society. All right? So, again, we are living in a patriarchal society, okay? We embody patriarchal values. So it's a system of male dominance, okay? So itong dominance na to, it can take, okay, into different forms, no? It can be economic, it can be physical, emotional, and psychological, all right? Kinds of or forms of dominance, all right? So basically, social institutions, specifically of marriage, okay, specifically of the way no our society is organized, they support, they promote and maintain, reinforce this violence no against women. All right, multi-layered to structural ito, no, that sometimes what makes it hard for us to mash no to fight patriarchy is that it is invisible. No, why invisible? Well, because it is so deeply entrenched, so deeply embedded in the social and moral fiber of our society that even us, no, that even tayo nagiging oblivious tayo to these mistakes. Okay? That it can even take years, no, years and decades, no, to realize that what yung values pala na tinatangan ko ay merong or rooted pala sa patriarchal na mga ideologies. Okay? So, that's why, no, that's why sexism and misogyny, dapat titignan natin ito not only characteristics of people or perpetrators, but ways, no, kamay siya ng patriarchy. Okay? So that's why, we commit ourselves into looking into these issues, looking into these concepts, no, because understanding things make it easier to change them. And it affords us, feminist philosophy affords us these conceptual and theoretical resources. All right. We also say here, no, na the way patriarchal society conceptualize issues, no, surrounding women. Sabihin natin, well, rape is just normal. No, boys will be boys. It's just the natural order of things. We shame sexually active women. No, we discourage women from speaking out, etc. We control women. All right? Ganun din, gender equality. Okay? So yung usapin ng gender equality, nandoon. No? Manifestation, daming manifestations ng gender inequality. Gender roles maintain the oppressive structure. All right? Kaya kahit sabihin natin, ma'am, our basic battles have already been fought, have already been won. No? But it doesn't mean that oppression is already eliminated. That there's still more that we can change, that we can transform in the society. Before COVID-19, we were already dealing with the pandemic. And UN calls this the shadow pandemic. And that is the violence against women. All right? So we must also recognize, no, ang laki ng role ng harmful masculinities here. The way we, or men, no, even, are conditioned to repress their emotions, to not express their emotions. No, they restrict this expression because of the way they conform to masculine culture. No? So dito naglilid yung bullying, sexual assault, aggression, because we try to conform to masculine expectations. All right? And we assert power when we are threatened. All right? At sa lahat ng ito, it's not really a matter of, well, ang pornography ba? It's a matter of ethical or unethical ba talaga siya? Moral ba siya? Immoral ba siya? For example, rape ba is a matter of right or wrong, true or false? It's not. It's just a matter of a power, who is powerful and who is powerless. Okay? And feminist ethics or feminist philosophy affords us this kind of theoretical resource, no, that we can use, no, as basis for lawmaking, for crafting policies that can respond to the needs of women and other sorts of marginalized sectors or marginalized groups in the society. All right. So now we expand the we expand the scope of ethics. We expand expand the scope of our questions. We ask intelligent, we ask right questions, okay, in addressing these problems. So the first thing is that we need to recognize the problem and we must have the commitment to address it. Okay, feminist na nga, nakita mo nga that our society needs changes. Okay? Pero kung wala akong commitment to improve the lot of women and other members, okay, of the marginalized sector, well, wala din. No? Kaya nga sinasabi natin, it's always twofold. Okay? To identify this theoretically, and we must act. Okay? Yung practical. Alright? Kaya nga, walang division dito between theory and practice. Alright? Unang-una, yung pag-deny natin na nag-e-exist ang problema na to, that's yet in the way, no, of solving this problem. Tulad ng experience ko, saying na hindi naman oppressed sa mga babae, okay naman na. Okay naman yung magulang ko, okay naman yung nanay ko, okay naman yung mga kapatid ko mga babae. Hindi naman sila oppressed, no? The way we deny, no, the denial of these problems, yun yung mas nagpapalakas ng locus ng power ng patriarchy, okay? Ng phallocentrism. Okay, feminism is a transformative politics. All right, it is focused on having this conscious effort of locating where the barrier is. Where are we at the moment? Where are the barriers that need, dismantling? Okay, so let's recognize the problem and let's have the commitment to change it. All right, we must have the emphasis on experience. Okay, so like sabi ko kanina, this is central to feminist politics. Why? Because don't you know that our experiences, we find, okay, the very manifestations of our subordination. But at the same time, we find here our strength, our experiences. Okay, we may find them, the subordination that we experience in the society, but we also find our strength in our experiences. All right. So at the same time, no, if we come forward, no, telling our stories, no, it becomes the basis of our collective consciousness of resistance. All right, our experiences are very dangerous, okay, to the culture within which we experience it, and this culture is the patriarchal culture, diba? So our experiences are dangerous. Bakit? Kasi it provides possibilities for change. It provides possibilities for learning. Yung na gustong i-inhibit, na gustong i-maintain ng patriarchal society. They precisely stand as the critic of the ways our social relations are organized. Ang experiences ko na to, ang experiences ko ng violation ko, no, ng violation ng violence na experience ko bilang babae o bilang member ng isang society ay isang manifestation na mayroong mali sa sistema. Okay? Ito ay isang clear critique, okay, that there is something wrong in the system and that we must be able to change it. Okay? That we must have the conscious effort, the deliberate effort of changing it. All right? So what is this that we say, about the politics of speaking out? How do we make sense of these narratives of sexual violence, of domestic violence? Ang gagawin natin dito sa mga experiences ng mga babae na to. Alright? So nakita natin na merong Me Too movement, merong Iha Ako movement. Okay? So makikita natin that these stories of violence, these stories of marginalization, of abuse, of powerlessness, okay? Makikita natin that this exists. Okay? Ito ang violent realities na kinaharap natin in the society. Okay? And that although it may be empowering for others to come out, to come forward with their stories, let us also recognize that it's not easy for everyone, for others. Okay? It's not easy to just share the permanent harm, the violent realities that we were experiencing, to make public the private suffering that we experience. All right? So, but we can be strong in the sense that, well, in everything that the patriarchy can control, okay, there is one thing that it can't, and that is the meaning to women. All right? So, like sabi ko in my other lectures, stories are not only hard to tell, and they are also hard to hear, and will be harder to hear well. Okay? So why? Kasi we say these things, sa culture of violence na kinaharap natin right now. All right? We say this in the spaces wherein we breed, we normalize cultures of violence. No? Marami tayong violence, supportive attitude. Eh bakit? Sino bang kasama mo nung uminom ka? No? Kaya ka na-rape. Sino bang, ano bang kasama mo? Okay? You were defined by what you wore during that time, by who you were with. No? And that you maybe elicit the assault. All right? That's why ang nangyayari is that there is this inability of the victim to reorganize oneself. And at the same time, there is the inability of the society to even recognize these victim survivors. All right? So, ma'am, bakit ba? What is it with violence that is morally injurious to women? Okay? So, of course, no, we can say that, well, maraming pwede tayo sabihin kasi nawawala yung autonomy natin, nawawala yung agency natin. But we can also say that, well, women's rights are human rights. No? But in reality, no, the very basic thing no, na nagiging morally injurious ito, okay, sa atin, is that it inhibits the very possibility of sexual self-making. Alright? So, merong yung practical activity natin to care for the self, it atrophies possibilities. Our trauma can inhibit our possibilities. Violence, our experiences of violence gets in the way. Okay, it violates the very practical activity of developing ourselves. Okay, the development of ourselves. So yung paranoia, yung stress, okay, yung safety concerns natin, no? Ito lahat to nagko-contribute doon, no? And then so as if no, it's saying that as if something that is violated can be isolated from our from our existentialist situation. So hindi naman pwedeng, okay, so victim survivor ako, and I can just live my life as business as usual. No? It's just business as usual. But we can't, because in the first place, it is not something that we can, just reduce ourselves by just violating, sorry, we cannot just reduce ourselves by isolating, by just cutting off this experience in our life. All right. And lastly, no, lastly, it begs that we consider, that we recognize the complexity of these issues. That it is morally and philosophically a mistake, to view these things as just a simple issue, no, or as the simplicity of this issue, because it is a complex one. Okay, it warrants the analysis of the interplay, no social and political discourses natin surrounding violence, no, and we see this as intersecting, we see all this as overlapping. All right, and needless to say, nakikita na natin that our personal is always political. All right, the way we think, no, the way we rethink these tools, these concepts, consent, right, sexuality, no, that the way that we shouldn't be pushed into private, no, or that when we try to make public our private suffering, no, we interrogate our experiences. We can say that always, no, mantra ng feminism, that personal is political. It's not that we want to cling on to these experiences, to our past, but it is that we want to break its role over us by interrogating our experiences. Because violation against one woman is a violation against all women. All right. And so, lastly, we must also, it is very important to feminist thought that we must see our society, no, as the site for change. No, although we can say that it's impervious to change, because institutions are very complex. It's very embedded, no, in patriarchal values. We must also see that it might appear impervious to change, but we can actually change it. All right. So lastly, I just want to uh, appeal, no, to most of us, no, how, or I am enjoining all of you, no, to be as reflexive and to aim for more All right, sorry about that. No, uh, I think my connector was. Nakikita niyo na ba ako? Okay na ba?
I can see your screen now.
Yeah, sorry. So sorry about that. All right. So yeah, lastly, um, uh, before I conclude this, no, I hope that with this discussion, no, with this productive and fruitful discussion, we'll be able to, or we'll be empowered, no, empowered enough to change and to challenge the conversation. So thank you, everyone, and good morning.
Thank you for that informative and enlightening and encouraging lecture, Ma'am Marga. Right, so before we continue to the next part of the program, which is the Q&A, we'll have a 10-minute break for Ma'am Marga Torres for a while and for you to gather your questions for the Q&A session. Right, so be sure to be back by 11:05, around 11:05 to 11:10. So I think we could continue now with our Q&A session. Hope you are back on your screens now. And we already have few questions from the various Ethics 1 sections. So let me now ask the questions from the Ethics 1 sections. So So one question asks, Ma'am Marga, does feminist ethics include the protection and uplifting of trans women? Does feminist ethics include the protection and uplifting of trans women?
All right, hello. So thank you for the question. Oftentimes I was always asked, if inclusive ba ang feminism, specifically feminist philosophy, sa plight, and issues of, or issues concerning the trans community. All right. So, well, when I teach feminist philosophy, I always make it a point, to include um, readings, resources, and discussions on how feminist philosophy can accommodate or can be in solidarity with queer theory, with trans theory, no, etc. No? So basically, even if it started, no, tulad ng sinasabi ko kanina, even if it started that feminist thinkers started to look at how women were discriminated and oppressed, okay, historically, no, ang aim ng feminism is not just, or in feminism, we reject the idea that we only focus on women's issues. Although we say that, okay, we started with issues concerning women, but it doesn't mean that we just stick with women's issues. Usually, isa sa talagang, we misconstrue feminist ethics as just about by women. But we must also like to offer perspectives on ways or cover issues that are of importance to human issues. Kasi for example, when you say rape, when you say pornography, itong mga to hindi lang naman talaga, they are not really and exclusively women's issues. It can also be men's issues. It can be also issues of other genders or of the LGBTQ plus community. Okay, so yes, I must say that feminist ethics can accommodate, can be in solidarity, in considering and including issues and plight of the trans community. Although we also recognize na some feminists, because feminism is a normative stance, it's always changing, it's growing. It's not a monolithic structure, na hindi na fix na siya, Merong mga feminists pa rin that don't consider, trans women as women. Okay? But at least, in the feminism that I believe in, in the feminist philosophy that I study, I engage with, that we must also focus, okay, not only on women's issues, but on neglected human issues. And that includes the trans and the LGBTQ plus community issues. Thank you.
Thank you for your answer. Here's a second question. In what sense do we know that our society remains patriarchal, given that much of society has progressed to allow women to take leadership roles, bring issues to court, etc., and even the laws you mentioned in your talk? Right? So, in what sense do we know that our society remains patriarchal, given that much of society has progressed to allow women to take leadership roles, bring issues to court, and even the laws you mentioned in your talk?
That's a really nice question. No, but I must say that as long as there is violence against women, then we are living under a patriarchal society. So long as nagkakaroon ng violations, oppression, subordination against women, then we are still in a patriarchal society. No? Kaya nga, as I have mentioned, no, actually it's very hard, no, even feminists to acknowledge that it's really hard, difficult task, no, that even to that we are battling a very invisible enemy, no. It's very powerful to the point that tayo mismo na-internalize natin yung mga patriarchal values na hindi tayo mismo aware that we are or that our beliefs, our ideologies are actually rooted in patriarchal values, no. So after all, what is most familiar, no, is often, one of the most difficult to recognize and hold up for deliberation, for appraisal, no. So I think my answer to that is hanggat may isang babae na hindi empowered, hanggat may isang babae na nakakaranas ng violence na to, na mga to, okay, is that we are under the patriarchal society. So I hope I was able to bring light to that. It's a difficult question.
Yeah, it's actually a difficult question because it's a question about knowing, right?
Yes, yes, and even if we say that hindi naman na ganun kakailangan feminism, di ba? Tulad nga nasabi natin, may mga laws na tayo, protecting us, etc. But do you really feel safe when you're just, where you're walking alone in the night? No? Na-eliminate ba yung catcalling, yung everyday mundane experiences natin? We are still living our lives in vulnerability, immersed in mundane lives natin, no? With so much vulnerability as women and as members of the marginalized sector. No? So even if this is progress, no, kahit sabihin natin na progress na to, there is still so much to change. There is still so much to learn.
Thank you for your answer. Here's another question, but quite long one. So let me first read the background of the question, right? So sabi dun sa background, some philosophers believe that ethics of care is propagated through traditional women's values in search for new virtues wherein the ethics of care is commonly based upon feelings, and this can be exercised regardless of the evidence against continued caring. So yun yung background ng question. And they ask the question, doesn't this lead us to the idea of being irrational that may violate basic moral codes? And so let me repeat again the background. Right, so they're saying that ethics of care is propagated through traditional women's values in search for new virtues, wherein the ethics of care is commonly based upon feelings. Right, so ethics of care daw based upon feelings. And this can be exercised regardless of the evidence against continued caring. Now, the question is, doesn't this ethics of caring that privileges feelings lead us to the idea of being irrational that may violate basic moral codes? And so, did you get the drift of the question?
I think that you rephrase the question kasi parang ang gusto niya talagang itanong is if ethics of care is, or well, correct me if I'm wrong, if ethics of care is anchored or based siya sa pag-value natin of the feminine values, specifically care,
Yeah.
Specifically connectedness, okay, feelings, relationships. Does this mean that we are irrational because we base this with feelings? And tama ba, Sir Vlad?
Yeah. And if we base them on feelings, this might violate some moral codes. May ganun yung tanong eh. So, wouldn't it be irrational, therefore, to base your ethics on something that might violate the moral code, whatever that moral code may refer to? So, parang may kinoconnect niya yung irrationality with the feelings or emotions.
Yes, yun nga yung gusto ko i-point out. Kasi in feminist ethics, we are clear that gusto nating i-critique yung bifurcation na to eh. Na yung masculine values ng autonomy, ng will, ng domination. No? Itong mga values na to, sinasabi ay masculine values. And yun yung priority ng traditional ethical values that we have to be um, impartial, that we have to be autonomous, and at the same time, dapat matangan natin yung ethics of justice. Rules, dapat nakabase tayo sa rules. No? And on the other hand, no, ang gustong i-criticize din ng mga feminist people is that, well, in the feminine, no, when we talk about feminine values, we some sort of value or revalue emotions, all right, or the way we decide on moral issues, not by referring to universal or abstract rules, tulad halimbawa ng Kantian ethics, utilitarianism, but more on the way we are situated, no, more on the emphasis that we are interconnected, no, na we put value on relationship. So tama yung question and statement that predicated ang ethics of care sa uh, value of caring, wherein one of the main goals is to revalue the feminine value of care. Okay, but at the same time, look for ways of doing or approaching ethics in the feminine and feminist way. So, bali ang tulad ng sabi ko kanina, for a very long time, yung ethics of care ang considered the feminist ethics, no? That's why, for example, in UPLB, yung feminist ethics namin is just focus on feminist ethics of care, no? Well, because naging appealing siya, no? Naging appealing siya because of the works of Gilligan and Noddy, no? Na nakita natin that, well, empirically, nakita natin that women have a different voice in approaching moral issues, no? Hindi katulad daw ng mga lalaki na naka-base lang sa doon sa abstract rules. But women actually act more on, or they view moral dilemmas as conflict of responsibilities more than conflicts of rights. Alright? Kaya for a time, binavalue natin na dapat ang universal value na meron tayo at capable tayong lahat is that of caring. Okay? Although there were objections, no, may mga objections sa parts na rin ng feminists na tinatanong din natin, meron ba talagang relation ang women at caring? Hindi ba, ma'am, all the more na mapaperpetuate ang women's oppression kasi mas tinitignan, mas emphasize na ang women talaga is confined in the home, no? Domestic realm lang talaga sa, no? Ang concern lang talaga natin is about caring, no? It's about mothering, it's about child rearing, no? Or focused on children's vulnerabilities. All right? So I don't think we are really saying na nagiging irrational tayo because we base our decisions, moral decisions in feelings. But I think mas kailangan pa natin tignan yung tenets of ethics of care, okay? Because ibang usapan yung, or iba yung value na tinitignan natin pagdating sa emotion.
Yeah.
I hope I was able to answer.
Let me proceed with the other questions because they're quite a lot here. Here, this is an interesting question also for me. Some feminists like Camille Paglia, I don't know if you know her, accept the idea that sexual desire is a biological function of men, which makes them prone to committing sexual abuse. What can you say about these feminists and their justification of rape? Can they still be called as feminists? Right, so some feminists like Camille Paglia accept the idea that sexual desire is a biological function of men, which makes them prone to committing sexual abuse. What can you say about these feminists and their justification of rape? Can they still be called as feminists?
Clarification. So if they argue that sexual desire are natural to men, and so it's justified yung rape sa mga babae, tama ba?
I don't know if that's the justification of feminists like Camille Paglia to say that rape
No,
is justified because it's the biological function of men to desire. I'm not
sorry,
familiar with Camille Pag.
sorry,
Kasi parang
medyo
tinanong,
choppy. Ano nga yung tinatanong niya is rape is justified because
it
sexual violence
seems
is
the
natural
question
to
seems
men.
to be saying that there are feminists like Camille Paglia who justify rape by saying that uh, rape is a result of a natural sexual desire from men. And so, what would you say about those kinds of feminists? Would they still be called feminists if they advocate or have justification for rape, regardless of what that justification may be?
Hmm. Okay, that's a difficult one. Um, First and foremost, hindi ako familiar sa kanya. And
Yeah.
although I already encountered feminists, no, na may mga pino-forward na mga ganitong issues, I would like to start by saying that, well, feminism, okay, for the most part, no, um, until right now, I contested pa rin yung meanings niya. No, why? Because as I have mentioned, it's not monolithic, it's dynamic, it's growing. Kaya, although ngayon, mas nagiging articulate na siya, um, hindi ko makita yung point of justifying rape because of sexual desire being a natural um anong tawag doon? Parang natural na
Function daw.
trait na function, natural na function of men. No? Kasi after all, we all have, well, all human beings have the capacity for reason. No? So I really am not sure of branding yourself a feminist or identifying yourself a feminist if you believe that it is the woman's fault. No? Kasi nahirapan ako sagutin kasi ang rape, no, and other women's issues, napaka-multi-pronged ng mga to, multi-layered siya na hindi siya masasagot ng one-on-one na maikling question lang, no. So marami pang mga kailangan ungkatin, no, na mga points, no, entry points kung saan mas masusolidify natin yung ating discussion. But well, for now, ang masasabi ko is that I think we must get to know or they must study more on these things, no, because history has already history was able to demonstrate to us, no, that itong mga to ay rooted in patriarchal ideologies. No, it's a matter of power play.
Yeah. Okay. Let me proceed with another question. Muslim women are urged by their religion to wear hijabs to maintain modesty and privacy. However, some non-Muslim people find this practice oppressive. Does feminist ethics challenge these kinds of religious practices and other cultural practices? Right, so Muslim women are urged by their religion to wear hijabs to maintain modesty and privacy. Right? However, some non-Muslim people find this practice oppressive. Does feminist ethics challenge these kinds of religious and cultural practices?
Well, I'm not really knowledgeable, no, on practices like this. No, I mean I am well aware, but hindi ako hindi ako knowledgeable in detail, no, sa practices na to and ano yung yeah, how does it function in their culture, no, but I think my answer would be yeah, feminist ethics can challenge, can pose criticism, so long as merong spark of discussion on how these practices can be oppressive, can reinforce, or can maintain, no, yung subordination ng mga kababaihan. Yes, feminist ethics is able to or is able to do this, to do this. able to critique and challenge these practices.
Yeah. Kasi actually hindi lang limited sa religion, even some cultural practices like female genital mutilation for instance. So di ba may mga cultures that practices female genital mutilation. So feminist ethics might have something to say about those
Yes.
cultural practices that
Yeah, even
may oppress women, right?
yeah, even the issues of virginity, for example, yung mga
Yeah.
ganito, although relative siya sa culture, pero I think sakop siya no, ng manifest.
Uh, Here's another question. How do we resolve the dilemma of women that willingly conforms to patriarchal norms, that they attack and undermine other women on this conformity? For example, Muka Oson versus Lenny Robredo. Yun yung binigay niyang example. And so how do we resolve the dilemma of women that willingly conforms to patriarchal norms, that they attack and undermine other women on this conformity? For example, Mocha Oson or Lenny Robredo, which is actually connected to the last question, right? So, for instance, yung women ng culture, what if they conform willingly by choice to those practices that may oppress them or oppress other women?
All right. Very intelligent and good questions. No? Challenging, very challenging questions. Well, if you are familiar with feminist thought or feminist, kung meron kayong course on feminist philosophy, you are well aware that feminist thought is as old, no, I mean old enough to have categories, no, strands na tinatawag. So meron tayong liberal feminism, meron tayong socialist, Marxist feminism, radical feminism, ecofeminism, postmodern feminism, existentialist feminism. So makikita natin dito that the diversity of thinking, no, of feminists, no, nagva-vary sila on how we approach problems, on how we propose solutions, okay, in ending subordination and oppression of women, no. So sabihin ng mga liberal feminists, no, they will say that, well, because ang concern natin is gender equality. So long as maging fair, maging patas ang game, wherein kung ano yung access na meron sa mga kalalakihan ay makuha rin or magkaroon din ng access ang mga kababaihan, magiging fair, no, yung battlefield. So, halimbawa sa mga liberal feminists, they will argue that, well, so long as makuha namin yung same access equality, okay, sa mga goods na ito, then okay siya, no? Then kaya natin ma-realize yung potentials natin, no? So, on the other hand, yung stand naman, for example, ng radical feminism will say na hindi enough, no? Hindi enough na maging patas ang law, hindi enough na magkaroon tayo ng access sa mga public goods na to. But kailangan nating ayusin yung culture. Kailangan nating makita na ang root ng oppression ay hindi lang nakaangkla sa law, hindi lang nakaangkla sa equality ng excess pagdating sa goods, but on the culture, but on the society, the practices in the society, no? So kaya ang punto nito is yung diversity of feminist thinking, no, na nagsasabi na may feminist na nag-advocate na, well, dahil they say na feminine values ay inferior sa masculine values, di all the more na dapat i-revalue natin yung feminine values. All the more i-uplift natin yung pagiging caring natin as women, yung pagiging emotional natin as women, no? At the same time, sasabihin naman ng mga existentialists or ng postmodernists, well, we have to defy it, no? We can exhibit masculine values, masculine characteristics para masabi natin na, well, hindi lang kami capable sa feminine values but for masculine values too, no? So ito ay isa sa mga magandang debate in feminist thought na paano ba dapat tayo mag-respond, no? I don't have a categorical answer to that, no? Kasi up until now, this is still talked about, no, by feminists. So how do we really approach, no, these things? Do we do we conform, no? And then we defy yung sinasabi ng society? Or do we make our own femininity? Do we create our own femininity? Etc. No? So, I don't have a categorical answer to that, but I think it all boils down doon sa diversity ng thinking natin on how we should emancipate women, no, through the available tools that we have in the society. Okay. I think marami pa. So, sorry, iklian ko na lang din yung isa. Yung answer.
Here's another question. A common charge against feminist philosophy and theorizing is that it is still a sign of privilege. That, for instance, women who think of and reflect on gender-based violence and injustice are precisely women who have the convenience of being able to do so. That's just the background of the question. A common charge against feminist philosophy and theorizing is that it is still a sign of privilege. Right? Women, in that only women who only women who think of and reflect on gender-based violence and injustice are precisely women who have the convenience of being able to do so. How may we respond to this charge against feminist philosophy and theorizing?
Oh, that is true. That assertion is very much correct. No? Kaya nga tayo nag-give birth to transnational feminism. That's why nagkaroon ng women of color feminism. That's why nagkaroon ng third world feminism. It is because of this charge. It is because of the privileging of white, Western, middle class women, no? Or what we, generally call the white feminist, no? Kaya nga hanggang ngayon, it is a continuous, conversation, no? How feminism, can be inclusive, okay, not only sa ating gender, kasi we can say that, well, women are already oppressed, but we don't notice that a lot of women are still, napapasok may double bind, double yung oppression, kasi woman ka na, babae ka na, at the same time, miyembro ka pa ng, halimbawa, ng low, in the low class, no? Society. O kaya, laborer ka pa. Alright? So, yung mga ganitong privileges, no? That is right. No? Hanggang ngayon, debate sa that it's continuously growing. No? We continuously try to articulate our experiences na hindi lamang nagre-reflect yung experiences ng mga white and Western feminists, but nag-take into account, even yung mga experiences of the third world feminists, women of color feminists, and indigenous feminists.
Yeah. This next question is actually somewhat related to the last question. So ito yung tanong niya. Are patriarchal and class-based oppression cannot be fully dismantled through the approach of feminism that is only surface level, that is focused on the female body. So parang tinatanong niya kung are the patriarchal and class-based oppression be resolved? Can patriarchal and class-based oppression be resolved if feminism just focus on the female body? And the next question is, does feminist ethics support the idea of joining the mass movement or activism and be one with the struggle of the masses? So parang about the limitations of feminism itself as a philosophy, as a movement. Kaya ba niyang i-dismantle yung patriarchal and class-based oppression kung yung focus mo ay yung female body? And therefore, if you agree with that contention, can feminist philosophy therefore join the mass movement in the greater struggle of the masses? Parang ganun ko nakikita yung tanong.
Yeah. We have what we call socialist Marxist feminists, wherein we do not only see laws, we don't only see the culture as perpetrators, as ways na nagko-contribute in women oppression, but it's the two-headed beast na tinatawag ng mga socialist Marxist. Number one is, ang kalaban natin is patriarchy. And pangalawa is capitalism. No? So, I'm not really sure about focusing only on the body. No? Hindi ko rin masyadong sigurado kung ano yung inclusion ng body lang. I mean, they really mean as body ng mga babae. No? Well, bodies are sites of oppression and pain. No? But I'm not really sure if it's only the focus. No? Paano tayo magre-respond sa issues na yon? Well, socialist Marxist feminists will say that we need to counter two things, patriarchy and capitalism. No? And that hindi lang natin dapat kasi ang oppression natin hindi lang naman dapat natin titignan, no, na bunga ng mga practices na to. It can be in the form of economic oppression. It can be in the form of sexual, no, violent sexual oppression, no. So yes, kasama ang feminism because tulad ng sabi ko kanina, feminism is a transformative politics, and its aim is essentially a form of activism. No? Kasi yung sabi ko that we only not aim to change theories. We aim to change societies. We aim to change the system. I remember last time when I was presenting in Germany, there's this philosopher, no, who's saying na, well, hindi naman nakakatulong in reality ang feminist philosophy sa pagbabago sa society, no? Nagulat ako kasi it's the first time na nakarinig ako from a feminist, no? She identifies herself as a feminist, na wala namang effect itong mga konsepto na to, or even feminist philosophy as a discourse on how we view rape, no? How we view sexual harassment. So, parang dun sa ganung mindset, no, that wala tayong capability to change the system. No? I think doon nasa-stunt yung growth of the movement. Yung merong ganong mindset that, hindi naman natin mababago yan kahit anong pag-aaral natin sa feminist, hindi naman natin mag-change yung sistema. No? So, but we need to recognize yung marriage of theory and practice. No? That's a view. A lot of philosophers have that same view. No? Na bukod, hindi naman nakaka-apekto yung mga pinag-uusapan namin sa subject matters, no? And even sa daily affairs of people, no? But it's important for feminism that it is a transformative politics. Okay, we aim to transform.
Yeah, thank you for your answer. Here's another question. In terms of philosophers such as Aristotle, who have an inferior view towards women, do you think their philosophies have further intensified the inequality and violence experienced by women in the society? Right? How can feminist ethics further correct the mistakes created by their philosophies in the academy? Right? So, how about philosophers like Aristotle and some other philosophers who have an inferior view towards women? Right? So, did their philosophies help to perpetuate and sustain the oppression towards women? Right? So that's one question. The second question is how can feminist philosophy and feminist ethics, more specifically, correct these mistakes created by their philosophies in the academy? Should we cancel Aristotle? What do you think?
Oh, that's a very good one. I actually made a debate sa aking feminist philo class on canceling since very relatable ito sa social media trend right now. Do we cancel specific philosophers just because he was sexist? Do we discredit, for example, Aristotle? We all know that Aristotle is one of the one of the most influential, brilliant philosophers. He created a comprehensive account, no, of theories, no, that are now still very relevant in philosophy. So, ang tanong dun, ma'am, paano yung mga philosophers na yun, yung mga sexist philosophers tulad ni Aristotle, tulad ni Rousseau, tulad ni Carl Jung, tulad ni Sigmund Freud, no? I mean, you can go on, no, and identify yung sino itong mga philosophers na so. But of course, I think for the most part, no, nakatulong no, nakatulong sa pag-perpetuate ng oppression itong mga views nila. Okay, but I also want to think of this as opportunities, no, opportunities, possibilities para baguhin yung canon. Kaya nga sa feminist philosophy, we are trying to rewrite, to rethink yung philosophical canon that not only include men philosophers. No, even me when I was in my undergrad, no, hindi ko man lang napansin, nga, no, parang wala akong masyadong women philosophers na reading, no? As in, ni isa, wala, no, na women philosopher na dinidiscuss sa klase. No, that's why I really make it to a point, no, na mag-include ng mga contemporaries ng mga to. I mean, the male counterparts ng mga philosophers during their time. Kasi these are very good possibilities. These are very good avenues, no, na ma-include na natin yung experiences ng mga kababaihan, no? Kaya nga, tingnan naman natin Oedipal complex, no? Tingnan naman natin, sabi ni Aristotle, women are deformed, impartial men. Kasi we lack reason, we lack the heat of the semen, we are just vessels. Diba? So, for the most part, yes, naka-contribute talaga yun sa oppression ng mga kababaihan. Kasi ganun nila inarticulate, ganun nila conceptualize yung mga issues that are central to us. But because we already have the avenue, the opportunities this time to talk about our experiences, no, that will reflect our experiences, that these experiences will inform further theories. After all, theories are also biased, diba? So all the more na mas kaya natin i-rewrite, no, ang canon, mas kaya natin i-rewrite yung history natin as women, specifically in philosophy.
Yeah. Here's another question. Actually, a series of related questions. What are your thoughts on the phrase "men are trash"? Does it help support the cause of feminists? Right, that's one. This is another related question. How about the Me Too movement? Are social movements such as the Me Too movement truly possible on social media platform alone? Right. So it's about these movements currently trending in our society. So yung Me Too movement, tsaka yung men are trash. What can feminists say about these movements? Do you think they help the cause of feminism?
Yeah. Well, tulad nga ng Me Too movement, men are trash, and yung very recent na iha ako, I also talked about this in my other lecture. No, yung isang question din is, man, bakit men are trash lang? I mean, not all men, no? At saka, women din naman, they commit violence, no? They were also involved in violence. No? So parang, paano nakakatulong yung mga ganitong trends, yung mga ganitong movement, okay, sa pag-forward natin ng gender equality. Well, first and foremost, the Me Too movement, and very recently, very specific in Philippine context is the Isha Ako movement, wherein victim survivors are starting to come forward with their issues, no, with their violent realities. Una-una gusto kong sabihin that this is not an easy task. Okay? There is a danger in recalling this. There is a danger in retelling our stories of violence. There is a danger in telling our stories of our violent realities. Okay, why? Kasi this is a dangerous memory work. The moment you tell your story, the moment you have to relive your story in your head and you have to write it and you have to make it known to people, it's already a very difficult task. And that's why it's very erroneous to say that empowerment is only positive. It can also be negative. Kaya kailangan maging inclusive tayo. Kasi being empowered enough to share your wounds, to share your private suffering, no? Hindi yun kaya ng ibang tao. Okay? Kung kaya yun ng iba, may mga tao pa rin na nag-hesitate, no? Na ma-judge ng pamilya nila, ma-judge ng society dahil sa mga naranasan nila. Okay? So, But it's a sad fact that women are actually defined by what happened to them. Alright? Kaya yun yung gusto nating baguhin. And this growing awareness because of the Me Too movement, the Iha Ako movement, it all the more shows us that this is a battle cry. When we say men are trash, this is not really just a hasty generalization that lahat ng mga kalalakihan ay, basura. No, they are all trash. No, it's not really saying that all of them are trash. This is a battle cry. This is a movement, no, by focusing on the things, the instances kung saan nakikita natin kung paano privileged ang mga kalalakihan. So even say that, well, ma'am, not all men. No, I mean, ako rin, ma'am, hindi naman ako oppressed. I feel empowered as a woman. Pinalaki naman ako empowered bilang babae. Pero itong along these lines, we must always check the parameters of our privilege. Because it is privilege, no, to talk about these things, no, na hindi natin na-recognize how this structural system, how this structural injustices actually affect gender, no? So in looking at these movements, I say we must check the parameters of our privilege. That hindi porke hindi nangyayari sa atin ay hindi nangyayari sa ibang tao. Okay? So I think magandang start to, no, na campaigns and awareness, and magandang progress sa laban natin in Feminist.
This is the last question since madaming nagtanong ng question na to. So I'll ask it despite the time constraints. Right? How can men fight with the feminist cause? How can men fight the feminist cause? With the feminist cause?
Right. So first of all, I like to believe that men are allies. No? Men, hindi sila excluded sa laban ng mga feminists. Why? Kasi but in feminism, ang aim natin is for human development goal na nai-inhibit ng subordination ng mga kababaihan. Tulad ng sabi ko, it atrophies possibilities for development ng mga babae, okay, just because of this, and even mga kalalakihan. Di ba? Kung makikita natin, don't so even think na bakit yung mga lalaki, they also have to conform to gender role. Bakit mga lalaki lang yung dapat ilaw ng tahanan? Bakit sila expected to provide for their families? Nasaan yung role nila in child rearing, for example? Ang dami natin nakikita right now na sila yung nasa bahay, hindi sila yung nagtatrabaho, etc. Di ba? Bakit when we talk about wars, when we talk about military, bakit mas focus siya sa, bakit mas pinapadala natin, for example, yung mga kalalakihan? Bakit hindi yung mga babae? Hindi ba mas delikado, no, yung buhay ng mga kalalakihan? Kasi whenever we engage, no, with wars, ang unang-unang kailangan natin isabak ay mga kalalakihan, no? So itong mga gender roles, expectations, masculine expectations na to, ay apektado din yung mga kalalakihan, no? Sila rin ay biktima ng patriarchal values and ideologies na perpetuate sa society natin, no? So I think men are our allies, in the pursuit of gender equality, and they can do so by firstly, again, checking their privilege, no? Affirming that yes, no, in the society makikita naman talaga natin. It is blatant, it's very explicit, no? Sa lahat ng nangyayari sa society, it's very explicit that men tend to enjoy more privilege and that women are historically disadvantaged in the society. Okay? Marami ng movements ngayon ng men against violence, no? May mga groups na ganito in universities, in organizations, no? At nakakatuwa that men are also now taking part, no, sa discourse natin. All the more that we need men, no, to join us, no, sa cause na to. Okay? Kasi tulad nga ng sabi ko, this is not only about women, but it's about us.
Yeah. So thank you, Ma'am Marga. I think we can end with that note, right? So This therefore concludes our Applied Ethics lecture series. Thank you, Ma'am Marga, again for that very enlightening and encouraging talk on feminist ethics. And we also would like to thank, of course, our first lecturer, Professor Artipada from UST for his talk on the ethics of recognition. Right. So I hope Ethics 1 students have learned many things from these two lectures on applied ethics. Right. So thank you again for attending our applied ethics lecture series. Isang mapagkilala at mapagpalayang araw sa ating lahat.
Thank you very much.